integer point. When we have a holomorphic function and we expand it, we have coefficients. So in fact, they're expansions at integer points. And these expansions, of course, give rise to a list of coefficients. You get coefficients in these expansions, and we want to interpret these coefficients as sum of divergent series. So we will at some moment need to introduce a notion of how can you give a value to a series which does not converge. It means regularization of divergent series. And then interpretation of coefficients. Coefficients interpreted as this kind of regularized values. So, since I have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 subjects, and I have essentially 6 talks. Essentially, one talk will be devoted to each of these subjects. So, I will start today by something very elementary, which can be found in the notebooks by Ramanujan. So Ramanujan was an Indian mathematician who was born at the end of the 19th century. And as a high school student, he used to have notebooks and to write down in the notebooks theorems that he was finding for himself. And he generally wrote these theorems without any proof or indication of proofs. So often these theorems are quite difficult to prove, and in fact one does not know generally which proof he had. He started these notebooks when he was, as I said, a high school student, 14 or 15 years old. The first chapter of his notebook is devoted to the following topic. He tries to build what are called Latin squares. A Latin square is a square n by n square, where you have entries, n square entries inside. The entries should be exactly all numbers from 1 to n square, each of them once only, and the sum of the columns and the sum of the lines should be 1. So in fact, this is a subject that he treated. It was the first subject on which he worked when he was quite young, but this is not the subject which I am interested on now. And then immediately after, maybe when he was 15 or so, I do not know exactly when, he started doing more classical mathematics. And in fact, I shall just write the very first formula that he wrote in his book, and we will try to understand how he got this formula. So the first formula that one finds in his notebook, which is not devoted to Latin square, is the following. 2 times log 2 is equal, I write it exactly like he writes it. 1 plus 2 divided by 2 to the 3 minus 2 plus 2 divided by 3 square minus 3. 3 cube. No, excuse me. I am wrong. 4 cube minus 4 plus 2 divided by 6 cube minus 6 plus, and he writes ad infin, which means you have to go to infinity and you have to sum this series. Of course, it is not for a professional mathematician a deed you have to prove, but one has to understand that this was the kind of thing that he was doing when he was 14 or 15 years old. And now, in fact, he has a certain number of similar formulas, similar to this one. And from the list of formula he writes, one can guess what method he had developed, because he developed all the methods by himself. He had no book, he had no clue about what has been proved already in the literature. In the literature also, he did everything by himself. And so I would like to explain what is probably the method that he used, because this method is used several times in a different context in various of his formulas. And of course, this method will have at some moment some relation with the Riemann zeta function. And the method is the following. In fact, it's a method in order to accelerate the convergence of a divergent series. Let us assume that we have a divergent series A1 minus A2 plus A3 minus A4, where all the ANs are positive numbers. And we would like to compute this series. In fact, Ramanujan gives the following formula. He says you just take the first term, half, and then you add another series, which is B0 minus B1, B1 minus B2 plus B3 minus B4, etc., where Bn is simply An minus An plus 1. So this look not so complicated. Let us just prove this result. So what is the result? I write the theorem. If the first series converges, the second one also, and equality holds. So, in order to do this, you just cut your your second series at some order, and when you cut it, you get A1 over 2 plus sum, let us say, plus 1/2. Sum, let us say I am going from n equal 1 to some capital N of Bn being An minus 1, and I have to multiply by the sign, which is minus 1 to the n plus 1. I have to compute this. So when I compute this, from n equal 1, excuse me, not An minus An plus 1, it is minus An plus 1. There was a mistake in my formula. And so, in fact, we see that each A appears twice. For example, A1 appears here, and it appears again in the term n equal 1. And in the term n equal 1, it appears with which sign? With a positive sign, because n is equal to 1. So we get here A1 over 2, and here also A1 over 2. And now, where does A2 appear? A2 appears here for n equal to 2, and it appears also here for n equal 1, and it appears with the same sign, which is in fact minus 1 to the 2 plus 1, which is minus 3. And therefore, we exactly get the same thing as sum for n equal 1 to capital N minus 1 to the power n plus 1 An, and there is one term which appears only once. It is the term corresponding to the index n plus 1, capital N plus 1, and this term appears with minus a half A index capital N plus 1 minus 1 to the capital N plus 1. And therefore, the theorem is proved, because if I know that this quantity has a limit, in fact, in particular, it means that the general term of this series should go to 0. Therefore, this quantity goes to 0, and therefore the limit of this sum is the same as the limit of this sum, and my theorem is proved. So in fact, it's just a very, very simple observation that gives this result. Now, let us try to apply this very simple fact to the standard formula. Log 2 is 1 minus a half plus 1 over 3 minus 1 over 4 plus etc. Log of 2 is given by this series. So this is an alternating series, and it does not converge very quickly because we have only a 1 over n in the denominator. So in fact, it does not converge very quickly. We are exactly in a position where we have a series like the previous one, and our an, in this case, is just 1 over n. So we decide to apply the formula, and the formula tells that we should take as Bn 1 over n minus 1 over n plus 1, which is the same as 1 over n times n plus 1. And so if we apply this, we get the formula log 2 is equal, I shall multiply the log 2 by 2 because I have this 1/2 which I want to get rid of, this 2 which is in the denominator. 2 log 2 is equal to a1, which is 1, plus, and then I have b1, which is 1 over 1 times 2, minus 1 over 2 times 3, plus 1 over 3 times 4, minus etc. And you see now we have still an alternating series, but in fact the convergence has been improved because the general term here is no more is 1 in 1 over n, that is essentially equivalent to 1 over n squared, and therefore it converges a little bit faster. So in fact what Ramanujan then did is just to group the terms, the two consecutive terms, these terms and these terms. And when you group these two terms, in fact, you get 1, 2, 3 in the denominator and a 2 in the numerator, plus 3, 4, 5 in the denominator and 2 in the numerator. And of course, 1 times 3 is the same as 2 squared minus 1. So you can write it as 2 divided by 2 to the cube minus 1 plus 2 divided by 4 to the cube, 2 to the cube minus 2, excuse me, 4 to the cube minus 4, etc. And you get the result that I had written here. So in fact, this result is just a result obtained by accelerating one time the convergence of your alternating series and then grouping two consecutive terms in order to get a positive series, and you get a series which converges like 1 over n to the cube. But of course, there is no particular reason to stop there. You could, when you are here, continue the process and say, I want to again accelerate the convergence of the series with the b's. And I just apply once more my process. So what do you get if you do this? In fact, you will get the following thing. You will get the fact that the series A1 minus A2 plus A3 minus A4 plus etc. is equal. You have the first term, which is A1 over 2. And then when you try to apply this procedure to the sequence, to this sequence, you will have a B1 over 2 with a 1 over 2, which will give you a B1 over 4 plus 1 over 4 times C1 minus C2 plus C3 minus C4, etc. Where this time Cn is Bn minus Bn plus 1. And of course, if you do this with Bn is equal to 1 over n times n plus 1, when you compute Bn minus Bn plus 1, if Bn is 1 over n times n plus 1, Cn will become 2 divided by n times n plus 1 times n plus 2. And you could continue, there is no reason to stop, you could, and of course you each time accelerate the convergence. A priori, your initial series was a series having terms of the kind 1 over n, essentially equivalent to 1 over n, and the second one 1 over n squared, and the third 1 over n cubed, and you can more or less accelerate the convergence more and more to have a series where you have to compute only a limited number of terms to get the value of your sum. And in particular, Ramanujan computed on his slate, because he had no paper, except his notebooks on which he did not want to make computation, so he computed on a slate, and he computed on his slate the logarithm of 2 with 10 exact digits, just by accelerating a little bit the convergence like this, and with having, of course, no book in hand, but just this very, very elementary tool. One general fact in what he writes is always his methods, when one understands them, are highly, highly simple. In fact, they rely on very, very simple methods, which often are not taught in higher education. For example, this method is generally not so well known. Okay, now let me just tell you something. What would happen if we were to compute a series which a priori does not converge at all? Let us try to compute what is 1 minus 2 plus 3 plus, minus 4 plus 5, etc. A priori, the theory should not hold in this case, because my series is divergent. In this case, I have an which is just n. If I compute Bn, which is an minus an plus 1, I just get minus 1 for all Bn. So in principle, this series should be the same as 1/2, half of the first term, plus 1/2 times 1 minus 1 plus 1 minus 1, etc. So, still, this series does not converge because its general term is not going to 0. But let us apply a new time the same procedure. So let me call Cn is Bn minus Bn plus 1. Since all Bn are equal to minus 1, Cn is equal to 0. And therefore, when I try to compute according to the rule which I had before this sum, I get 1 over 2 plus 1 over 4 plus only 0. So I get at the end 3 over 4. So is it true that this sum is equal to 3 over 4? In fact, now I want to convince you that it is true, in fact. And that, in fact, what I have said in this kind of blackboard with very, very elementary tools gives you the simplest way I know to get the analytic continuation of the Riemann theta function. Just let me see. Oh. Yes, it is, you are right. Here it is minus 1. It is minus 1 plus 1 minus 1. You are right. And therefore it is minus 1 over 4. And therefore it's 1. You are right. Absolutely. Thank you. So, in fact, now let us try to get a meromorphic continuation of the Riemann zeta function. And in fact, curiously, Ramanujan had exactly by this method the meromorphic continuation of the Riemann zeta function, whereas he did not know what a holomorphic function is, he did not know what a meromorphic function is, he had no clue about residue theorem or anything like this. He was considering the Riemann zeta function only for real values. So in fact, only for real values, he had to extend it in the negative side in some well-defined manner. And in fact, what he does is the following. I just use his notation. He was writing SR is equal to 1 over 1 to the power R plus 1 over 2 to the power R plus 1 over 3 to the power R, etc. So this is exactly what one writes now, zeta of R. It is the Riemann zeta function evaluated at R. And of course, this SR makes sense when R is strictly bigger than 1, as we have seen this morning. And now you can also associate another series, which is the corresponding alternating series, which is 1 over 1 to the power R minus 1 over 2 to the power R plus 1 over 3 to the power R, etc. And you can ask what is the relation between the first one and the second one. And the relation is just the following. If you take SR and if you remove 1 minus 2 to the power, and if you multiply it by 1 minus 2 to the power 1 minus R, SR, what is 2 to the minus R times SR is 1 over 2 to the power R plus 1 over 4 to the power R plus 1 over 6 to the power R. And you remove these 2 times, then in fact you just get S prime of R, S prime R. So you have this equality. And therefore, if you want to get a meromorphic continuation of SR, it is sufficient to get a meromorphic continuation of S prime R, because this relation will then give you a meromorphic continuation of SR. And how can you get a meromorphic continuation of S prime R? You just start with this divergent series, and you apply sufficiently many times the process of accelerating convergence. Even if R is a negative number, so if you have positive powers of 1, 2, 3, when you take differences, in fact, the size of your coefficient decreases, and when you take differences sufficiently many times, at some moment you get a convergent series. And you decide that in fact you start with your series, whatever R is, you accelerate convergence up to the moment where you get a convergent series, and the result of your convergent series, this you will call the regularized value of S prime R. So, to give a meaning, to S prime R for all R in, let us say, capital R, except one you cannot, because for one this coefficient, this bracket here vanishes. It is sufficient no, for S prime R, it's for all R in R. It is sufficient. Excuse me. To accelerate convergence a finite number of times. Up to the moment when the series converges in the usual sense. And of course, if you are in a neighborhood, you can do this when R is real, but you can also do this when R is complex. It works exactly the same way. And if you are around some given complex point S, in fact, the number of times you have to accelerate is the same for all points in this small neighborhood of your complex point, and therefore the final series that you have, which converges in the usual sense, will converge towards holomorphic function of S, and therefore what you have at the beginning is in fact a holomorphic function of S. So in fact this procedure proves the meromorphic continuation. You have not to prove it, you get it from the method. And also this procedure allows you to compute, if you wish, the value of the Riemann zeta function at all points. It gives a procedure which will give you a convergence series. So let us, as an exercise, compute zeta at -1, zeta at 0, and zeta at -1, just to see how it works. Of course, these values which I am giving can always also be deduced from the formulas that have been given this morning, but I would like really to stay in this framework of series which do not converge, but which we make converge in some unusual sense. So how do I compute zeta of, let us say, 0? Zeta of 0 is just what I call S0. So if I want to compute S0, I use this formula here, and I relate it to zeta prime of 0. So it will give me, it is minus S prime of 0. And now, S prime of 0, what is S prime of 0? It is in fact 1 minus 1 plus 1 minus 1. So all an are equal to 1. The corresponding bn are equal to 1 minus 1. Therefore, they are all 0. And therefore, when I make the acceleration of convergence, I get 1/2 of the first term, which is just 1/2. And I have no other term because I have only zeros after that. And therefore, S prime of 0 is equal to 1/2. And you get the formula zeta of 0 is equal to minus 1/2. And this is indeed the value of the Riemann zeta function at 0.
Will we always get an absolutely convergent series as a result of this process?
What?
An absolutely convergent series is always the result of this procedure an absolutely convergent series.
When you start from the series involved in the Riemann zeta function, you always end up after finitely many terms with an absolutely convergent series. If you start from any alternating series, it's not true. But if you start from those involved in the Riemann zeta function, it's always true. Whatever S is, whatever S, your S is a complex number, you sum the alternating series, sum of -1 to the n minus 1 divided by n to the power s. You accelerate the convergence finitely many times, and you will end up with a series which is necessarily absolutely convergent after finitely many times. And this series will give you, in fact, an analytic continuation, and therefore you can compute the Riemann zeta. Since the analytic continuation is unique, in fact, it is the same as the one that was obtained this morning by using the gamma function, the theta function, and so on. And therefore, it is indeed this function that you are computing. Let us compute zeta of -1 as another exercise. So, zeta of -1. So this is just S index -1. So I have to take here R is equal to -1. So I have 1 minus 2 squared. So it is -3. And therefore it is S prime -1 divided by -3. So I have minus S prime -1 divided by 3. And what is S prime -1? In fact, it is 1 minus 2 plus 3 minus 4 plus etc. Which we have to compute by using our acceleration procedure, which I have already computed just before for you, and for which we have got that the value is 1/4. And therefore, by using this and this, you get that zeta of -1 is equal to -1/12. And this is indeed the value of the Riemann zeta function at -1. And sometimes you find in, for example, if you type on Google, what is the sum of the series 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, etc. What is this sum? In fact, you type it on Google, and the Google will immediately lead you to plenty of papers that tell you that the sum of this series is -1/12. So, of course, it has to be interpreted in some manner. It is, of course, this series is divergent and its sum is plus infinity. This is completely clear. But in fact, this series is indeed represents more or less the value at -1 of the Riemann zeta function, and this value is indeed -1/12. So you see, this is a kind of game that we will at some moment play by trying to assign values to series that in fact do not look to have a value. And of course, if you do this, I shall not do it here, but by using this method, so with no other input, we can, for example, prove that zeta of -1 minus n is rational for all n larger than or equal to 1, just because if you look at the series you will have to sum, it will be 1 to some integer power minus 2 to the integer power plus 3 to the integer power. And when you will compute the Bn, your integer power will decrease by 1. And when you compute Cn, the integer power will still decrease by 1. And after finitely many steps, you will get differences which will only be 0. And therefore, after finitely many steps, your procedure involves only finitely many rational numbers. And therefore, you get this. And you can, and more precisely, zeta of 0 is equal to -1/2. Zeta of 1 minus 2n is equal to minus b index 2n divided by 2n, where b index 2n is a Bernoulli number. Of index 2n, and zeta of minus 2n is equal to 0. So this is for n larger than or equal to 1, and this is also for n larger than or equal to 1. So in fact, this method gives the values of the Riemann zeta function at negative integers. Now, I would like to state a small theorem. So there is a problem in the theorem which I have stated before, accelerating convergence. The problem was the following. If I start from a series, alternating series, where the sum of the first alternating series converges, I know that the second one converges also. But many examples that we have seen on the blackboard say that if the second converges, it is not true that the first one converges in the usual sense. Yes? So, can this be repaired? The answer is yes. And in fact, Ramanujan also wrote in his notebooks how this can be repaired. He gave a very explicit way to repair it. So we would like to have a statement, a theorem that says the series with the AN converges if and only if the series with the BN converges and the sum of the two sums are the same. Except that we have to change a little bit the notion of convergence. And I will tell you now a new notion of convergence, slightly different from the previous one. It is called the Abel convergence. So let me try to introduce this. So I start with a series where I do not assume necessarily that it is the alternating sign. I will call it UN. Definition. We say that a series sum for, let us say, for n going from 1 to infinity UN is Abel convergent if the series, the generating series where I multiply the UN by x to the power n converges for all x between 0 and 1 excluded, and converges here in the usual sense. And its sum, which is now a function of x, has a limit when x goes to 1. And this limit is called the Abel sum. Of the series. Just let us try to work out an example to see whether we can do this. Let us try it as an example. UN is equal to -1 to the power n plus 1 divided by n. So in fact it is the series 1 minus 1 plus 1 minus 1. No, not n, minus 1 to the power n, just, excuse me, minus 1 to the power n plus 1. Okay, so this is U1, this is U2, this is U3, etc. Let us try to do this. So, first thing which I have to do is what happens when I compute sum for n going from 1 to infinity, un x to the power n. So this is just minus sum for n going from 1 to infinity minus 1 to the power n x to the power n. And x, I consider x only when x is between 0 and 1, different from 1. Then indeed this series converges, which I have here, and in fact its sum will be minus x divided by 1 minus x. It is just a geometric series. You know how to compute this series, and so therefore its sum is just x divided by 1 plus x, and this is my function f of x. And then I have to look whether the limit when x goes to infinity of f of x, when x goes to 1 of f of x exists. And in fact, when x is going to 1, this limit exists and is 1/2. And of course, we get the same 1/2 as before. So in fact, it's already a second method that gives the same answer. When you have plenty of methods that give the same answer, like physicists, if you have 1,000 experiments that give the same thing, you think you are on the right track. So in fact here, since we find always the same value, even if our series is divergent, it means that probably there is something true behind. And now, in fact, there is a famous lemma which is called Abel's lemma, and which I shall prove. If the series sum of un converges in the usual sense, of convergence, it converges, it is also Abel convergent. Moreover, its sum in the usual sense is the same as its Abel sum. So just before trying to prove this lemma, let us try to understand what this lemma says. It just says that in fact we had a poor notion of convergence, which is a usual one which we were using. But we have a more powerful notion of convergence, which is Abel convergent. It's more powerful because each time you have something which is already convergent in the poor sense, it converges in the other sense. And moreover, since in that case the two sums exist, it just means that if you decide to work with Abel convergence instead of working with usual convergence, you have just more series that are convergent, and their sums have not changed with respect to the past. You have not lost anything with the past. You have your previously convergent series are still convergent with the same sum, but you have new series that become convergent now. This is exactly what Abel's lemma says. So proof now. So we can always, by changing the first term, in this series and in the Abel case, we can always assume that the series converges to 0. And then we use this Abel trick of summation. So, what we have is the following. We have an equality, let me see. I have lost the place. Yes, it is here. Yes. We can write the following thing. Sum for n going from 1 to infinity, un x to the power n is equal to, then let me call u capital N is equal to u1 plus etc. plus un. So in fact I have my first term, which is u1 times x, and then I can write plus sum for n going from 2 to infinity, u index n plus 1 minus un, capital U, times x to the power n. In fact, I can rewrite this by separating the two series. I have one series which gives me the sum for n going from 1 to infinity, un. Let me see. Just a moment. It's not un plus 1 minus un, it is un minus 1. I was wrong. If I want to get small un, I have to take capital un minus 1. So I will get the sum of un x to the power n. It comes from this term and from the first term here, minus the sum for n going from 1 to infinity, un x to the n plus 1, and this comes from this term. These series are in fact convergent, because since my series is initially convergent, it means that the general term is going to 0. No, since it converges to 0, it means that capital un will go to 0, therefore is bounded, and therefore this series converges when x is between 0 and 1 excluded. It converges, and I can separate the two things. And then when I separate the two things, I just get equal 1 minus x times the sum for n going from 1 to infinity, un x to the power n. And then I say the following. I choose an epsilon, which is positive. Let epsilon positive be given. There exists a capital N such that un, absolute value of un, is less than epsilon for n larger than or equal to capital N. This is because capital Un goes to 0. I have assumed that my series is convergent and that its sum is 0. And therefore, I get a bound, absolute value of the sum for n going from 1 to infinity, un x to the power n, is bounded by what? In fact, I keep the terms before capital N. It is I have 1 minus x, yes, 1 minus x, sum for n going from 1 to capital N minus 1, absolute value of un, and I delete the x to the power n, which will be bounded by 1, and then I get plus, and the remaining term, in the remaining term, I just say that all the un are less than or equal to epsilon in absolute value, and the remaining curve give me a geometric series which is bounded by x to the power n divided by y minus x, and of course I have here a parenthesis. So in fact I can still simplify this thing and write it is less than or equal to epsilon because my x is smaller than 1 plus 1 minus x times the sum for n going from 1 to capital N minus 1 absolute value of un. And then I fix my n like this and I ask x to be close to 1. If x is sufficiently close to 1, this sum becomes smaller than epsilon because this is fixed now, capital N has been fixed, and now only x varies. So for x close enough to 1, the second term is bounded by epsilon, and therefore absolute value of f of x, which is the sum which I have to compute here, is less than or equal to 2 epsilon. So what do I get? In fact, that f of x is going to 0 if x is going to 1, and this exactly means that my series is convergent in the Abel sense, and its sum is also 0, therefore the same as the initial one. So this is Abel lemma. And now, in fact, let us go back to the acceleration procedure by Ramanujan, and let me give you a theorem. And this theorem is explicitly stated, of course, not in the usual sense today, because in fact we generally have a tendency to state our theorems by definition, theorem, proposition, and we have a very formal language to write this. In fact, in Ramanujan, it's written, you have to understand through the formula that he writes that in fact he has this theorem in hand, but it is not stated in the formal sense as mathematicians state it. Nevertheless, it's clearly there. Let an be a sequence of not necessarily positive numbers, they can even be complex numbers, doesn't matter, and Bn be the sequence where Bn is equal An minus An plus 1. Then A0 minus A1 plus A2, etc. converges in the Abel sense if and only if B1 minus B2 plus B3, it's A1 minus A2 plus A3 in my notations, B1 minus B2 plus B3 plus etc. converges in the Abel sense. And then, when this is true, their sums, which I called A and B, satisfy the relation that we had written at the beginning. The sum with the A is half of the first term plus half of the sum with the B. So the new thing in this theorem with respect to the previous one, that we have a complete symmetry. Previously we had, if this series was convergent in the usual sense, the second one also. But if the second one was convergent, the first one not necessarily. When you work in the Abel world, in fact, the two things are absolutely equivalent. So let us try to prove this. Oh, I do not know where I have put my paper. Yeah. Yes. So the first thing will be to try to see that, in fact, when we modify our series by putting an x to the power n, the first one converges if and only if the second one converges. So we have to get bounds of the Bn with respect to the An. Bn is less than or equal to absolute value of An plus 1. This is clear. And on the other hand, we have to get a bound for An in terms of Bn, and a bound is An is less than absolute value of A0 plus absolute value of 0 plus absolute value of Bn minus 1. By the triangular inequality. Not A0, A1 and B1, yes. Sometimes I write the series starting with 0 and sometimes with 1. In fact, so you have these two inequality. And from the first equality you deduce, the first equality tells that if the radius of convergence of sum of An x to the power n is at least 1, the radius of convergence of sum of Bn x to the power n also. And the inequality 2 that you have here tells you the converse. If the radius of convergence of the sum of Bn x to the power n is at least 1, then the radius of convergence of sum of An x to the power n is also 1. And therefore, we know that in fact our series with an x added, if one of them converges for x between 0 and 1, one excluded, the other one also. So assume that these two series, assume that these two radius of convergence are at least 1, and let then f of x be the first sum and g of x be the second sum. And let us try to compare f of x with g of x. So what I claim is the following. I have a1 times x plus x times g of x is equal to 1 plus x times f of x. So let us just try to prove this claim. It's very easy. We start from this side. This side is a1x plus sum for n going from 1 to infinity Bn is in fact an minus an plus 1. I have to put x to the power n, and since I have put an additional x here, it is in fact x to the n plus 1, which I have here. So this is the proof. Then, exactly as before, there are signs which are missing here. Let me see. I have a sign which is missing. It's not an x to the power n. You can see it's an minus 1 to the power n minus 1. N plus 1. And here also minus n plus 1. It is this thing which I wanted. So in fact I have to put here a minus 1 to the n plus 1. So I get first the sum for n going from 1 to infinity an x to the power n minus 1 to the n plus 1, which comes from this term, for the first term n equal 1, and from this term for n larger than or equal to 2. And then I get plus sum for n going from 1 to infinity an x to the n plus 1 minus 1 to the n plus 1, and this one comes from these terms, which are here. And when I look at this, in fact, what do I get? I get exactly 1 plus x times the sum for n going from 1 to infinity an x to the power n minus n 1 to the n plus 1, which is in fact 1 plus x f of x. So we have this relation between the function f and g. And now, in order to know whether our series converge in the Abel sense, we have to look when x goes to 1 whether f and g has a limit. If this side, if f has a limit when x is going to 1, of course this side has a limit, and therefore g has a limit when x is going to 1. Conversely, if g has a limit when x is going to 1, in fact this side has a limit, therefore this side has a limit, and since 1 plus x is going to 2, in fact f of x has a limit. Therefore f has a limit if and only if g has a limit. If and only if g has 1. And if this limit exists, in fact there is a relation between this limit if this limit exists, and are called capital A and capital B, we have just to pass to the limit in the previous formula which I had here, and we have A1 plus B is equal to 2 times A, which means A is equal to A1 over 2 plus B over 2, which was in fact exactly the formula which I wanted before, which I had stated in my theorem. So it means that now we have a very nice theorem, and in fact from this theorem I can derive a consequence, corollary, which you generally will not find in the literature also, and it is the following. the series sum for n going from 1 to infinity minus 1 to the n plus 1 n to the minus s converges for all s in C towards a holomorphic function in the Abel sense. Not in the usual sense, of course. In the usual sense, it does not converge always. Why is that true? Just because this series, after finitely many steps of accelerating convergence, as I said, will become a usually convergent series. But a usual convergent series is Abel convergent. But our theorem that we have said says that if after accelerating it is Abel convergent, it was already Abel convergent before. And therefore, your series convergent. So it is this kind of theorem which I wanted more or less to tell you, which are theorems to be found in Ramanujan, which are very curious because they do not look of exactly the same flavor as the ones we are used to see classically in mathematics, just because they take sometimes a notion of convergence which is slightly different from the usual. Of course, Ramanujan was not the only person who did this. In fact, a certain number of bright mathematicians, like Euler, had already before him done similar things. But I think it's very, very clear in his paper that he has, for example, exactly the statement which I derive here as a corollary. And in fact, when he sums series, often he does not say in which sense he sums them. He is summing them, but he has always one very precise meaning about what is the summation he is doing. In fact, in which sense he is summing the series. Okay. So I think this is what I wanted to say about this aspect of things. And now I would like to give you a second method, a third method, because we saw one this morning. We have seen a second one here to more or less extend meromorphically the Riemann zeta function, and I would like to derive a third one. And the reason why I am interested in a third one is that neither the first one that we saw this morning nor the second one which I have explained now work for multiple zeta functions. So in fact, the third one, which I will explain, is the one that generalizes very easily to multiple zeta function, and it is the reason why I am explaining it in this framework. Okay, we forget everything and we start with something different. Yes. Okay. So let us say I give you a title which will be the translation formula. For the Riemann zeta function. So let us start with a very simple equality. I compute n minus 1 to the power minus s minus n to the power s. And in fact, I just expand this as a power series, minus n to the minus s. So when I expand it, in fact, I get it is the sum for k going from 0 to infinity of s minus 1 times s, etc. You have to go up to s plus k minus 1 divided by k plus 1 factorial n to the minus s minus k. So it just comes from the fact that this term can be written as n to the minus s times 1 minus 1 over n to the power minus s, and I expand this thing and I get n minus s times 1 minus n s over n plus s times s plus 1 over 2 n square minus s times s plus 1 plus s plus 2 over 3 factorial n cube, etc. So in fact it is just this procedure, and you remove the first term n to the minus s, it removes the 1, and therefore it is not minus, it is plus. It is plus because when I take the derivative, I will get a minus s times minus 1, which will be plus. So it is just the expansion. And I get this result. When this result is valid, this is valid for any n larger than or equal to 2. Because a priori, if I take n equal 1, this series, here it's a plus, excuse me, this series does not converge very well when n is equal to 1. For any n larger than 2 and any s
you have s minus 1 in the first formula and no s minus 1 in the second.
Excuse me, just one moment. Why? Oh, excuse me. You are right. I was wrong. I had changed my thing. It was 1 minus s. So I had s minus 1, and then s minus 1 times s. It is correct now? Yes. S minus 1 times s plus 1, etc. Absolutely. Okay. Now, assume that for the moment s is a real number and bigger than 1. Take the formula that we have here and sum it for n going from 2 to infinity. So we sum both sides for n going from 2 to infinity. What do I get on this side? On this side I get n equal to 2, it gives me 1 to the power 1 minus s, which is just 1, minus 2 to the power 1 minus s, plus 2 to the power 1 minus s, minus 3 to the power minus s, etc. It's a concatenating series, and I get just 1 is equal to. What do I get on the left-hand side? I get sum for k going from 0 to infinity s minus 1, s up to s plus k minus 1 divided by k plus 1 factorial. And here I sum n to the minus s minus k for n going to 2 plus to infinity. If I were summing from 1 to infinity, I would just get zeta of s plus k. Since I'm summing from 2 to infinity, I get zeta of s plus k minus 1. Am I allowed to do this kind of computation? I am allowed to more or less exchange the summation with respect to n with the summation with respect to k. The answer is yes, because all the terms which I have on the right-hand side are positive. I have assumed that s is real and larger than 1. And when you have a double series of positive terms, you can exchange freely the summation. The sum might be infinite, but if in one order it converges, then in the other order it converges too, and to the same sum. So in fact, since I know that in one direction it was convergent, because when I put the sum over n before I know that it converges to 1, the second one converges, and it converges to 1 also, and I get this result. And now what I claim is that this gives a meromorphic continuation. Of zeta to the whole plane. How do you see this? In fact, the method to get this meromorphic continuation is the same method as the method in order to prove meromorphic continuation of the gamma function by using the functional equation. We have seen the gamma function this morning, and the gamma function gamma was defined only for real part of s larger than 0. And for real part of s larger than 0, it satisfies a functional equation, which is gamma of s plus 1 is equal to s gamma of s. If you know that you have this functional equation that holds for real part of s larger than 0, then you are able to extend your gamma function, let us say, for real part of s larger than minus 1. Why? Because you will just define gamma of s to be gamma of s plus 1 divided by s, and gamma of s plus 1 will be in the region where, in fact, gamma is well defined and holomorphic. And of course, you get denominators because you have to divide by s. So you introduce a pole at s equals 0. And then when you are gone up to the half plane real part larger than minus 1, if you want to go to the half plane real part larger than minus 2, you just use your functional equation once more. And by this procedure, step by step, you go on the left-hand side and you cover the whole plane and you introduce poles, and the poles that you introduce are only poles introduced at 0, minus 1, minus 2, so at the negative integer, at the non-positive integers. In fact, this formula is very similar to the previous one, because this formula is of the following type. You have 1 is equal to I write the first term corresponding to k equals 0. The first term corresponding to k equals 0 is just s minus 1 times zeta of s plus, and the second term is s minus 1 times s over 2. Just let me see. Yes. Zeta of s plus 1 plus etc. Now let us assume that I know already that zeta of S exists for all S of real part larger than 1. Then, in fact, when I want to extend up, let us say, to real part 0, in fact, the only term which is not well defined is this one. All the other terms have already a meaning. If my series here converges, I have forgotten the minus 1 in these terms. Yes, if I know that zeta is holomorphic for real part of S larger than 1, all the terms except the first one are defined when real part of S is larger than 0. And therefore, I can give a meaning to zeta of S when real part of S is larger than 0 just by removing from 1 all these terms, dividing by S minus 1 and adding 1, and I get a formula that gives me zeta of S and gives me a meromorphic continuation. So in fact, this is already known, and therefore I get a value for zeta of S. Since I divide by S minus 1, I introduce possibly a pole at S equal 1, and that's all. And then I can continue the process. In fact, if I have extended it up to real part 0, I can extend it up to real part minus 1, because this time, when I am after real part minus 1, all these terms involve only real part larger than 0, for which I know already that the thing exists. And therefore, I get a meromorphic continuation for zeta up to real part minus 1. And therefore, using this kind of functional equation, which I call the translation formula. Why translation formula? Because, in fact, you have translation in the variable, translation by positive integers. In fact, this is a formula which is a functional equation different from the functional equation which we wrote this morning, but it is a functional equation with infinitely many terms, not only 2 terms like for the gamma function, but which in fact gives a meromorphic continuation. The only thing that we have to see is whether indeed the series that we have here on the right-hand side converges, because in fact we need that all terms should be well defined, but we also need to know that in fact the series converges. But this is completely clear, because in fact when you look at zeta of, let us say, t minus 1, this, when is bounded by the sum for n going to infinity 1 over n to the power real part of t, exactly in the same way as this morning, and this is bounded by constant time divided by 2 to the real part of t minus 1, because you compare the sum with the integral exactly like it was done this morning. And in particular, it means that the brackets that we have here, when we take for t s plus k, this bracket decrease like 2 to the power k, so decrease geometrically, like geometric series 1 over 2 to the power k, whereas these terms that we have here grow only polynomially in k, and therefore, in fact, the series converges, and the series converges for any value of s, whatever s is in the complex plane. And this gives the analytic continuation. I shall just try to apply this. Or maybe, since my time is almost over, I will just stop there, yes.
Так, после ланча начнутся семинары. Семинар по теории